Hello, it's Alex and welcome to Hey Little Thrifter. Today I'm going to be sharing part 2 of my April book haul, which was pretty big to begin with and it got bigger. So in part 1 I had already amassed 60 books and I think I showed 34 of them in that video. But since then the grand total has increased to 75, so if my calculations are correct, I have another 41 to still share with you guys. There have been a ton of library book sales in my area recently and I have gone to all of them. It's been a lot of fun searching through tons of books and finding some treasures, and of course they've all been super cheap. And of course the money goes to those libraries, so it's nice to know it's going to a good cause. I think all of the books from the book sales this month came to somewhere between $30 and $35, which is, yeah, insanely cheap considering just how many books I bought. And they are mostly horror, but I did find a couple of other random things. I think I got a couple of sci-fi novels, I got some true crime. So to dive in, I'll start off with a stack of paperbacks. I got Greeley's Cove by John Gideon, which apparently is the place where your worst nightmares come true. Next is Predators by Eric Sauter, and this one does have some really wonderful artwork, which is pretty fantastic. Yeah, like that one a lot. And this one says, "They came from the wilderness to the heart of the city, a man, a wolf and a woman, hungry for revenge." I got Stephen King's Danse Macabre, which I've never read before but really would like to, so I was really pleased to find this copy. And this is his kind of delving into various things horror, like books and film, etc. Next is Others by James Herbert, and this is one of his that I don't know too much about, but from reading the back, it's apparently about a private investigator who is looking for someone, and his search takes him to like an old person's home, and yeah, apparently there's a lot more to the place than meets the eye. Next is The Vampire Memoirs by Mara McCunniff and Tracy Briery, and yeah, I couldn't resist this one and I love a good metallic red title. This one is about a vampire over many centuries. It says the story spans the 1600 years from her birth in the 4th century in a small British village to her present day life in Los Angeles. So this looks like it could be a lot of fun. Next is a bit of true crime. It is The Search for the Green River Killer by Carlton Smith and Thomas Gwillan. And inside, this one actually had like a paper clipping. It's from Sunday, December the 2nd, 2001, a newspaper article about how, yeah, DNA helped solve the case. So that was interesting, and I also at the same book sale happened to pick up this one, which is a fictional novel based on the Green River Killer. It's called River by Roderick Thorpe. I haven't heard of this, so I don't know if it's any good or not. Next I got 2 John Saul novels. I got The Unloved with this wonderful skeleton lady on the front, and Punish the Sinners. I have yet to read John Saul, but these 2 sounded really good, so I look forward to them. I also managed to find some 90s YA horror, which I was really pleased about because I don't seem to stumble upon that very much, you know, out in the wild. So first up I got volumes 2 and 3 of The Forbidden Game by L.J. Smith, and you might notice that I already have the UK versions of these. The covers are so incredibly different, and I did tell myself I wouldn't start collecting all of the US versions of point horror books, but sometimes if you just stumble upon them and they're incredibly cheap, and these ones were in like pristine condition, I couldn't leave them behind. And apparently now I need to track down volume 1, but I love these covers. I think they are absolutely wonderful. And they have these rather wonderfully 90s fluorescent spines as well. I mean, you just can't beat that. Also by L.J. Smith, I got volume 1 of the Vampire Diaries, The Awakening, and I think, is this the book series that the TV show was based on? Or am I confusing it? I think this is the one. I remember when that first came out and I started watching it thinking it would be just my cup of tea, but I never really got into it, so I didn't get very far in watching it, but I would be intrigued to check out at least volume 1 of the book and see how I like it. And I found 3 more 90s YA horror books. These 3, and they're from Pinnacle Horror. I didn't realise they did any YA horror, so that was kind of interesting. But yeah, what do we have? We've got Witch Hunt by Wendy Corsi Straub. We have Just Pretend by J.V. Luton. And last up is Deadly Detention by Eric Weiner. Okay, moving on to a stack of hardback books. I got Night Shift by Stephen King, and this was from a book sale that wasn't huge, but the room where they had all the tables set up, they had this one like little round table full of Stephen King hardbacks, and it was just this adorable little layout which I thought was wonderful. But yeah, I got this one, which I was really pleased to find because it was in really good condition, and I do have a paperback version of this, but it's kind of falling apart, so this is a bit of an upgrade. And the second book I got from the Stephen King table was The Stand. This is, for the first time, complete and uncut. Yeah, this one is just ginormous, but it's one of those books that everyone says is one of Stephen King's best, so one day I will tackle it. I also got a couple more Stephen King books from different libraries. First up is the Bachman books, and this contains Rage, which I believe is out of print, so I was quite pleased to find this one. And also Pet Sematary, which funnily enough, I think it was just the night before or like very recently, my husband and I had gone to the cinema to see the new film, which we both really enjoyed. I thought it was excellent. Personally, I think it was a better adaptation of the book, even though there were some changes. I really enjoyed it. I think they did a great job with the tension and the emotion, which are 2 really big factors of the book. And anyway, I already have a paperback edition of this, but this, I believe, is a first edition, so I couldn't leave it behind. And this one is it's from the library of Margie Phillips as well, so that's a bonus. I'm sure some people, like legit collectors, you know, things like this would drastically reduce the collectability and value of something like this. Personally, this adds to it. So there you go. But yeah, was really pleased to find this one. I got Spook Country by William Gibson, and I don't read much sci-fi at all, but I have read all of William Gibson's novels. I think he's excellent and I really love his work. I used to have all of his books, but I had to get rid of a lot of stuff when I moved from the UK to the US, and yeah, books were one of the things I got rid of a lot of. So yeah, I was quite pleased to find this one and maybe start making my collection again. Another one I was really pleased to find is Sacraments by Clive Barker. I've heard really good things about this one and it had been on my wish list to read, so yeah, happy to grab this one and hopefully we'll read it before too long. It looks like the next little stack is a bunch of non-fiction. So first up is Little Girl Lost by Drew Barrymore with Todd Gold, and I do have a paperback of this which I've already read some years ago, but I'm a big Drew Barrymore fan. I think she was like a real icon in the 90s when I was a teenager. So yeah, I always have had a bit of a soft spot for her, and I thought this hardback edition was pretty cool. Next is Sybil Exposed by Debbie Nathan. This is the extraordinary story behind the famous multiple personality case. I have yet to read Sybil, but I do have a copy on my shelf, and I thought this would be an interesting follow-up to read after I actually read Sybil. Next is The Stately Ghosts of England by Diana Norman. I just couldn't resist this little book. I loved the cover once I get rid of this sticker. and yeah, it's just a bunch of different stories about ghosts around England. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. I got 2 books by Montague Summers, The Vampire and The Werewolf, and he's an interesting guy, someone that I've heard about over the years but don't know too much about. But I believe he was a clergyman and he wrote these books plus some books on witchcraft, and I think they all came out, I'm thinking the 1930s or thereabouts. That could be totally wrong, but yeah, I thought that these might be a bit dry but still interesting nonetheless, so I was really pleased to find these 2. Okay, this is the last of the hardbacks, but there's another stack of paperbacks to get through. So this one is Dreadful Pleasures, An Anatomy of Modern Horror by James B. Twitchell. I couldn't resist this, it looks amazing. I think it came out in like 1985 or something, so of course it's only going to go up to that year, but it should be an interesting read nonetheless, and I think it has various pictures, although I've only found one so far, but yeah, you get the idea. Okay, back to some more paperbacks. I got another science fiction novel. This is We by Evgeny Zamyatin. This is translated by Mira Ginsberg, and this I believe is a dystopian future type sci-fi novel, and I only heard about this, you know, maybe a couple of years ago because of Megan over at Spinebreakers talking about it. I think it's one of her favourites, and it's one I had never heard of before hearing her talk about it. So yeah, I was really pleased to stumble upon this copy. I'd definitely like to read it sometime. I got another Stephen King novel. This is The Dead Zone, and I've seen the film adaptation of this. It's starring Christopher Walken and it's directed by David Cronenberg. Really great film, but I've never read the book, so glad to have this copy. There are a couple of random ones here. I got the novelisation of Adventures in Babysitting, which is one of my all-time favourite 80s movies. This is written by Elizabeth Foucher, based on the motion picture written by David Simkins. Yeah, I couldn't resist this. I remember renting this on video back in the day, and I had a huge crush on Brad. Of course I did. Next is More Tales from the Midnight Hour by J.B. Stamper. This is 13 stories of horror in this tiny little volume. This would be a fun one. I think I'll save it for around Halloween, and it should be a fun little read. And I found a Choose Your Own Adventure book. These were big favourites of mine when I was younger, and I never had this one. This is Ghost Hunter by Edward Packard. It does have a crease to it, but otherwise this cover is pretty incredible. And yeah, I'm quite looking forward to reliving my childhood and giving this one a read. I also got Slade House by David Mitchell, and this is one I've heard really good things about. I've never read any of his books actually, but this is the one of his that intrigues me the most, so I was really happy to find this one. And another non-fiction book is Killers of the Flower Moon by David Gran. This is the Osage murders and the birth of the FBI. I've heard, talking about Spinebreakers earlier, I've heard Sue at Spinebreakers talk about this one, and I think she enjoyed it, so I recognised it because she talked about it, and I was happy to find this one. And also FBI related, I found Mindhunter by, can't remember the author, my memory is terrible, but I shared that one in part 1 of this mega book haul, so yeah, should be interesting reads. Okay, we're down to the last little stack now, we can do this. I got The Nursery by William Johnstone. He was one of the authors that wrote a bunch of horror for Zebra, and so yeah, I was quite pleased to stumble upon this one, even though it's probably fairly trashy, but it's got a metallic red title. So I got Laurie by Robert Bloch. I've never read any Robert Bloch. He's famous for writing Psycho, and unfortunately this copy has seen better days, but I was still really pleased to find it. This is, I think, more of a supernatural story, and yeah, really looking forward to giving this one a go. And just the other day actually I watched a Robert Block Party video that Chuck the Book Dweller did on his channel, so I will link his channel below. Definitely go check him out, he's awesome. Next up is Fox's Earth by Anne Rivers Siddons. I read one of her other novels, The House Next Door, which is definitely one of my favourite reads of the year so far. It was absolutely brilliant, and I believe that is her only real horror novel. This one I think probably just fits more under, you know, literary fiction or just non-genre specific really, but it sounds interesting nonetheless, and I really liked her writing, so I was happy to find this one. And this one I believe is about a family. It's told over multiple generations, and I think there's something dark and disturbing going on within this family, so yeah, sounds intriguing. I got Alien by Alan Dean Foster, and I believe it was Alien Day just the other day, so that was funny timing. And I know Alan Dean Foster is highly regarded within the sci-fi genre, even though I haven't read any of his work yet, but yeah, this was a good find. I got Primal Scream and Burnt Bones, both by Michael Slade. I believe these are books 6 and 7 in what is called the Special X series. The first one in the series is called Headhunter, and I read that earlier this year and really enjoyed it. It's a really good detective on the hunt for a serial killer story, but it's pretty dark. It has lots of layers to it, so yeah, kind of crosses into the horror world. And I already have books 2 and 3, and now I have 6 and 7. You know, it's not going to be tomorrow when I get to them, but I will get to them one day, so I figured I would snap them up while I saw them. Just these kind of things you don't really see, you know, out in the wild too often, so they were a good find. And last up, we made it. I got Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, and this is obviously doesn't really need much introduction, but it is the first book in the Hannibal Lecter series. I have Silence of the Lambs on my shelf and I really want to read it, but I believe this book comes before it, so I wanted to get a copy of this and read it first, so I was happy to stumble upon this one. Anyway, that's Red Dragon. So that is it. That is the end of my mega April book haul. If you're still here, thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you read any of these. I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope you have all had a wonderful April, and I hope May is even better. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I will see you again in my next video. Bye!